Today, I have the honor of introducing Hannah Giles. Hannah Giles is the founder and director of investigations at the American Phoenix Foundation. She's the journalist who originally conceived the idea for the ACORN video investigation, which she later executed in 2009 with fellow investigative journalist James O'Keefe. Immediately following the September 2009 release of her investigation, the Census Bureau and IRS cut off ties with ACORN completely. The United States Congress and Senate voted in an overwhelmingly bipartisan manner to defund the organization. ACORN has since declared financial bankruptcy. Her work has received national and international coverage on all of the major news networks. Ms. Giles has also received extensive awards for her courageous act. Hannah is an avid surfer, poet, adventurer, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. Please give a warm welcome for Hannah Giles.
Good morning. How are you guys doing today? I hope you're inspired by Ms. Parker's speech. Are you? Okay, I want to ask you guys a very simple question, and I need a show of hands, and I need you to be honest. How many of you have been told that you can do something great in life and that the Lord has a grand design and destiny for you? How many of you have felt the pull of a higher calling? That's impressive. Now, please don't raise your hand for this one, but think about it. How many of you are ignoring that pull? How many of you are like Jonah, content to stay where you're at because you think it's impossible and unfeasible to go where God wants you to go? That was me when I was a freshman in college. I was so content to make straight A's, surf beautiful waves, beautiful glass waves, at dawn and dusk every day, and work a great paying job, a glamorous great paying job, that allowed me to rub elbows with the rich and famous and travel all over the Caribbean. By my family's standards and my friends' standards, I was being blessed. I was being abundantly blessed. And there's no question about it. If you're flying in and out of Bimini to Miami and then to Nassau and then to Aspen within a week, you're blessed, right? But I was dying inside. I was dying inside because I was ignoring God's call on my life. If I answered the call on my life, it would mean turning my back on my life in Miami. And I wasn't ready to do that. I said, God, please hold. And let's be honest, I was a Christian, I was going to church. At that point in my life, I could justify my actions. It was too risky to do what he called me to do. And so I would live a content Christian life, a content, prosperous Christian life on the beaches of Miami. I would tell people, my spiritual advisors, oh, I'm fine. And y'all know what FINE stands for, right? Freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So after about a year or so of ignoring my Creator, I became angry at the mediocrity within me. And I took the plunge and decided to devote 100% of my life to the Lord. I came to learn, it was a difficult process, but I came to learn that handing your life over in faith to be used for God's perfect will is hard. How many of you have done that? It's hard. And it doesn't help that it's directly contrary to what our culture teaches. You want the most gratification with the least amount of pain, suffering, and embarrassment. After a year of humbling myself before the Lord and my family, I landed myself a journalism internship in Washington, D.C. How many of you have been to D.C.? It sucks, doesn't it? However, when I was there, I was in a great spot spiritually, emotionally, and physically. I hadn't given up my life in Miami, but my attitudes about the things I did in Miami had definitely changed. I had a new problem, though. I was thoroughly unimpressed with Washington, D.C. How was I going to change things in a city that was that far gone? It felt as if the monuments and the magnificent buildings on Capitol Hill were belly laughing at my naivete. It took a lot of prayer and self-questioning my first week in D.C. to realize that physically, if the Lord didn't want me exactly where I was in D.C., I wouldn't be there. I had to trust the Lord's bigger plan for my life. And in the meantime, while I patiently waited, I just needed to work hard, important, be faithful, and have a good time. I had no idea I was about to embark on an adventure of a lifetime, and I definitely didn't know that my adventure would rock the nation. I had no clue that the events that would ensue after I implemented a plan that originated on an afternoon jog. I had no clue that I would soon be running around the country dressed as a hooker with a man I didn't know. I didn't know I'd be pretending to run an underage sex trafficking business, meeting with famous media personalities, meeting with power players in D.C., or watching Jon Stewart in South Park give my investigation extensive coverage. I didn't know I'd be a defendant in multiple lawsuits, be offered large book deals, or be outfitted for bulletproof vests. I didn't know that I would be held responsible for the bankruptcy of the 30-year organization that got President Obama elected. And the thing I definitely didn't know, the thing I could have never predicted, was that I would be paving a new path for truth seekers across this nation. So why was this small idea, why was my ACORN investigation so scandalous? Why did it receive so much national attention? My theory is that the video footage we captured in those ACORN offices around the country disrupted ACORN's narrative. For too long, ACORN got away with a story that they were helping poor people. Never mind, ACORN's leaders were directly robbing the very people they were pretending to help. Never mind, ACORN had been investigated over and over again for fraud, especially their voter fraud and their involvement with the mortgage crisis. But the very moment that my videos came out showing ACORN all too willing and able to help facilitate underage prostitution, the U.S. legislative bodies voted overwhelmingly to defund the group, the Census Bureau severed ties with them, and their private donors disowned the group. Those videos showed evidence that was clear and undeniable, shedding light on 30 years of corrupt practices. Why did it take me, a 20-year-old intern, to expose such a blatantly corrupt organization? Why didn't the thousands and thousands of career journalists take on this investigation? Or why, if they did, why were their stories never heard? I think it's because the establishment media has lost its purpose. The media used to expose corruption, but now the establishment media has become a part of the corrupt power structure. They advocate for those they perceive as friends and have become nothing but stenographers who are afraid of challenging authority for fear of losing their place on the corporate ladder. And the current journalism schools do nothing to change things. Rather than develop young journalists' skills in speaking truth to power, they carefully instruct students on how to join the existing power structure. And they warn them of the consequences if they choose the unbeaten path. This ultimately destroys the creativity of justice, the courage and creativity of justice-seeking individuals. Would your egos be bruised if you went to school and they said, you can't do this or else you'll never be employed again? Would your ego be bruised? No? I can't hear you. So, it's for that reason that I'm devoting my life to recruiting young, justice-seeking individuals into the field of journalism. Whether it's the mysterious, undercover investigators or the hard-hitting beat reporters. I believe there are hundreds of young truth seekers who are ready and waiting to have the call in their lives activated. A great social tactician, Saul Alinsky, once said, "It is the continuous fight against the status quo that revitalizes a society." Guess what? It's not hard, it's not expensive to challenge the status quo in your neighborhood, city, or nation. I need a show of hands. How many of you write or work for your school newspaper? I counted 3 people. Is there more in this room? Is there more than 3 people that work for the school newspaper or write for it? Okay. At a school like CCU, with the leadership that you have here, that is absolutely unacceptable. Your editors need to be rejecting 50% of the articles and stories submitted to them. They shouldn't be begging for submissions and stories. I hope to hear from Vanessa Jackson later this week. Is she here? Hey, Vanessa. Vanessa's right here. I hope to hear from Vanessa later this week that submissions and people trying to apply have doubled, quadrupled, something. 3 is unacceptable. Don't submit opinion or blog entries, please. We have enough opinion in this world. There are untold stories in this city, and there's endless sources of evidence. It's not hard to go get. Go find those stories. All you need is courage and creativity and an uncompromising desire for truth and justice. Do you guys have an uncompromising desire for truth and justice? That was like a quarter of the room. Really? Do you guys have an uncompromising desire for truth and justice? That's better. Imagine what your world would look like if you and your friends took charge and started holding the corrupt accountable for their actions or inactions. Imagine a world like that. Let me tell you something. If you know what is right, if you sense that deep down, if you know what is pure, and you can, for but 1 second, imagine attaining that thing and sharing that thing, then you must with all your power seek it out. If you don't, the memory of that moment you imagined will forever itch inside your head and ache inside your heart until you are ruled by fear and tormented by regret. It was that feeling that I had carrying out the ACORN project. It was that feeling that kept me functionally sane during the video release. And it is that feeling that keeps me going forward. It's time more people with a hunger for righteousness began, as Robert Greene said, exploiting the chaos of the world instead of succumbing to it. We live in a cruel world, CCU students. It demands we bolt out of dreamland and wipe nostalgia's sweet kisses away. Principles and beliefs are ageless only so long as those who possess them see to it they are not forgotten. Societies, any society, will always tend towards all things bad if the powers that be don't lead wisely, and if they are not held accountable by their people. The future is a blank canvas, a giant glowing question mark held in place by eternity. That's a concept that would send most people into a tailspin of wonder, anxiety, and fear. But to others, this makes life a bit simpler. An unknown future ought to allow us to fully operate and thoroughly enjoy the present moments. I challenge all of you here today, even the ones on their computers, to take a step back and look at life on the grand scale. All of us are but specks of dust, here today, gone tomorrow. What kind of speck are you going to be? The kind that gets swept under the rug? Or the mote that flies into the eye of deceit, threatening to agitate it beyond repair, and forcing it to submit to truth's brutally thorough cleansings? Which one do you guys want to be? The one that gets swept under the rug? Good. I'm going to wrap this up with a short poem. I am a college dropout. I turned down a career in the big leagues to marry the man of my dreams. I turned my back on the establishment to figure out what life meant. I don't work a 9-to-5, but the one cool thing is, I don't depend on the man to survive. I don't play the world's game. To what cause will you devote your name? CCU students, I urge you to recognize the call on your life. Search and discover what that is. And once you've identified it, chase it down with ferocity. Do you have a problem with that? Let's do Q&A. Lots of questions. Hopefully I have answers.
Thank you, Hannah, for your remarks. We'll start right over here.
Hi, I have a question. I'm Erin, and I was just wondering, as Christians and journalists, what ethical line needs to be drawn in how we obtain information and, how we expose it?
I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I'll speak into the mic. So as Christians and journalists, what ethical line needs to be drawn in how we obtain information and how we expose it?
So first, as law-abiding citizens, I would suggest following the law. What's the local law? What's the state law? Also, I'm an undercover journalist. I train undercover journalists. But we train them so they don't have to lie undercover. You should never have to lie to get a story. If you do, you're treading on some very sticky territory. So, and also, is it for the greater good? God knows your heart. If you're going to go do something to get a story, it's between you and God. He knows what's going on. If you don't have a problem with it, if you know that the Lord doesn't have a problem with it, then you need to go get that story. In Nazi Germany, if Christians were hiding Jews in their basement, Nazis come knock on your door and they say, "Do you have little Jewish children in your basement?" How are you going to answer that question? So those are the kinds of things you need to think about when you're doing journalism. Next question.
We'll go right over here.
Hi, this is loud. My name's Ashley, and I'm a staff, Ashley Watakai, and I'm from Colorado, and I'm just really inspired, so thank you for sharing and coming here. I am curious what emotions you experienced when you left it all and took that courage and had kind of overcome your fear and just said, I'm going to follow this deep, deep calling in my life. I want to know more.
So I was a freshman it was at the end of my freshman year that I took the plunge and said, okay, Lord, I have no clue what I need to do. I don't know what you want me to do, but I feel something. I feel you calling me towards you. And so for a year, I literally just plowed into books and developed my prayer life and took notes, and I wrote a lot. And this is something that I think our culture has problems with. I isolated myself. All my friends that were just a bunch of drama, I just said, I'm not talking to you. And that was hard. The people that I had to surround myself with were older people, mentors, family, and I spent a lot of time with the Lord praying. And it's hard, especially in our culture with iPhones and iPads and Facebook, to just take a step back away from all the nonsense and the noise. And after the ACORN project, I had to do the same thing. I had to take a step back from the noise. That's why I didn't take the book deals. That's why I didn't take the TV deals. So I needed to take a step back from the noise and make sure that I was in a right spot with God and that I was following his call and not getting sidetracked with where the world wanted me. What the world thought was my calling, I needed to figure out what's God's calling. And that was a difficult process. You can ask my husband. I went through that right when we got married. It was an interesting time, but it's hard. And you'll feel it, and if you need to isolate yourself from Facebook and your iPhone, you need to do it. And that in itself is courageous.
Go right over here.
So just to say again, my name is Ryan Allen from Aurora, Colorado. And so yeah, I actually heard about you, and so I deeply appreciate the fact that you were able to reveal the corruption found in this ACORN society. But when I heard the fact that you took up like this undercover job, something convicted me. I think that it was from the Lord, and so I want to ask you something about your involvement in this. So when you decided to become an undercover agent in this prostitution, did you do it willingly? Did they say to you, we want you to basically deceive others into believing that you're a prostitute? So did you agree to that, or was this more like unexpected? Like one day you were just participating, oh, this is my prostitute. And you're like, wait, what?
So, not only did I agree to do it, but it was my idea. Okay. Background on me and my psyche. Before I took on the ACORN investigation, I was basically in line to work for the CIA as an undercover agent. That was my goal. That was the life I was heading towards. And I couldn't justify working for the government. I couldn't, and so I still said I want to work for the CIA, but whatever, we'll see where the Lord takes me. And I also wrote for my school newspaper in college during the 2008 election, and that's when I learned about President Obama's ties to ACORN. When I said that I landed an internship in Washington, D.C., the house that I lived in Washington, D.C., was 3 blocks away from ACORN housing headquarters. And the housing section of ACORN had not been investigated. It was something that wasn't on the news. You always heard about ACORN and their voter fraud. You didn't hear about their involvement in the mortgage crisis, their ties with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. You didn't hear about those things. And it was on a jog in Washington, D.C., in the summer of 2009, that I jogged past ACORN housing headquarters. I continued my jog. I said, oh my gosh, there's ACORN. I've been writing about them for months. I continued my jog, and I saw many prostitutes many prostitutes and many drug dealers in the neighborhood. And I was destroyed inside and furious because here's an organization that's supposed to give housing to people that can't afford it. They're the hope for the low-income families. And yet the neighborhoods that they're based in are full of depravity. They aren't changing anything. They're perpetuating a cycle. And by the end of that jog, by the time I got back to my apartment, is when I decided that I needed to go undercover as a prostitute to prove that they weren't doing anything but perpetuating a sick, sad cycle.
I see. So then could you tell me then, would you consider what you did to have been lying?
I was dressed as a prostitute, and I asked questions. I said, I want a mortgage. I don't have a bank account. And I said, okay, here's how